Charlie, esta hora no está sonando, ¿verdad? Ok, ok. ¿Se las quito? Don't mock me or I will laugh. ¿Todo bien? Eric ya enfocó. Thank you everyone for coming. We will be starting in a few minutes. Soy yo. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Universidad Latina de Costa Rica, I would like to welcome you, OPHI team, all participants in joining us today. I want to express a special salute to our rector, Mrs. Rosa Monge at Universidad Latina de Costa Rica, our vice rector, Mr. Alexander Cespedes, and OPHI personnel, our former Madam Vice President of Costa Rica, Ana Elena Chacon, and OPHI personnel, Ms. Corinne Mitchell, Mrs. Monica Pinilla, Ms. Juliana Milovic, Ms. Lachi Selde, Mr. Suraf Das, and Mr. Ricardo Nogales. Our sessions today explore a question that is increasingly relevant for researchers, practitioners, and policymakers alike. How can we better understand well-being and poverty in a world where environmental sustainability, economic opportunities, governance, structures, and territorial realities are deeply interconnected? Traditionally, poverty has been examined through economic indicators. However, multidimensional approaches have shown us that well-being is influenced by a much broader set of factors, including education, employment, access to services, social participation, environmental conditions, and cultural contexts. Today's sessions bring together three complementary research experiences developed in Costa Rica. They will examine issues in different territorial scales and disciplinary perspectives. The first session will take us to the Gulf of Nicoya in Guanacaste, where we will explore how sustainable aquaculture can contribute to territorial development within a socio-ecological system. The second presentation will examine green jobs and the opportunities generated by the transition toward a sustainable economy at a national level. Finally, the third presentation will provide a community-based perspective from the Bribri indigenous territory of Amubri, reflecting on how much multidimensional poverty can be understood beyond the measurement and through the life realities of communities. Together, these experiences invite us to move beyond measuring poverty toward understanding how well-being is produced, experienced, and sustained across territories. Let us begin with our first presentation, and let me welcome Mrs. Ana Robles Herrera with a round of applause. Her presentation is Aquaculture, the Territorial Development. Mrs. Robles Herrera, is the Director of Research and Sustainability at Universidad Latina de Costa Rica, and a doctoral candidate at Docinade. Her research focuses on integrated management and sustainability of aquaculture systems in the Gulf of Nicoya, using transdisciplinary approaches that combine environmental sciences, governance, social sciences, and territorial development. Today, she will share findings of her doctoral research on how aquaculture can contribute to sustainable territorial development and what lessons emerge when we analyze productive systems through multidimensional lens. Once again, Mrs. Ana Robles Herrera.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be able to take part in this forum and share with you this project that I have been working on the last 3 years in the field of sustainable aquaculture in Costa Rica. This is a project that Latina has been working on collaboration with other national and international universities that have been involved throughout the process. Rather than simply presenting the result of a project, I would like to share some of the decisions, challenges, and lessons we encouraged during the process, and how these relate to the implementation of strategies to tackle multidimensional poverty. Many of you probably work in areas very different of Gulf of Nicoya. However, I suspect that several of you will recognize similar challenges: dependence on primary sector activities, climate vulnerability, regional inequalities, and limited economic opportunities. We have been carry out this project in the Gulf of Nicoya, a region of Costa Rica Pacific coast, as shown in the box. If we look at the map, the country showing regional development indices according to the plan, the Gulf of Nicoya is defined as an area with low levels of development. We also find several marine protected areas. Consequently, it's an area of great interest for management, both in terms of economic development and sustainability. And it presents important characteristics that must be taken into account. In this regard, the Gulf of Nicoya is a rural region that depends on primary production activities such as fishing, agriculture, livestock farming, and aquaculture. These activities are characterized by high dependence on ecosystem services and therefore highly vulnerable to climate change. Furthermore, there are numerous issues related to access to resources, sources of employment, and inequalities that must be addressed. With this in mind, we find that aquaculture has been proposed by FAO and by numerous researchers as an economic alternative capable of boosting development dynamics within communities and meeting employment and food needs. This means that aquaculture production has the potential to alleviate the condition of deprivation found in the Gulf of Nicoya. Sustainable management of production could become a pathway to regional development. Over the time, we discovered that this is a question conceal another far more interesting one. What does a projective activity need in order to truly become a driver of regional development? With this in mind, we undertook a study that enabled us to understand the aquaculture system and its opportunities for development with a view of sustainability. Once this was clear, we were able to proceed with a management approach aimed at boosting local development in terms of sustainability. When we examined the structure of the aquaculture system in the Gulf of Nicoya, we found that it forms part of a socio-ecological system comprising small-scale production of prawns, oysters, mussels, and snappers. These are managed by fishermen organizations and small private enterprises. We also found a diverse range of public organizations, academic institutions, and NGOs, as well as commercial structures, which together form a broad and complex ecosystem of stakeholders. This heterogeneity and complexity in the organization have to be taken into account when we select methodologies during the study process. For this reason, we undertook a comprehensive study which sought not only to assess the level of sustainability within the aquaculture system, but also to understand the system itself. We set out to analyze the system through its history and how this led to its current state and how it might lead to desired condition of sustainability. We want to understand the ecosystem of its stakeholders, its governance structure, the environmental and social challenges, as well as the production system itself. This required a transdisciplinary approach involving researchers from various academic disciplines. In methodological terms, we opt for a mixed methods approach, incorporating both qualitative and quantitative data collection strategies alongside various analytical methods. Sustainability levels were measured using quantitative indicators applied at the level of individual farms. One key point was that although we carry out a preliminary selection of indicators from the design of the data collection tool, once in field, we encounter many gaps in information. And I believe this was one of the project's first important lessons. The indicators that we designed from the office were not necessarily the ones that the community was able to provide data for. Rather than view this as a limitation, we came to see it as a natural part of implementation process. Another key aspect was that the mixed methods approach on which the study was based enable us to carry out a comprehensive analysis of the system. In this way, the qualitative data and the analysis fill the gaps in the quantitative analysis, allowing us to explain key aspects of sustainability, such as how, why, with whom, for what purpose, and when. Looking back, I would say today that the indicators explain what was happening, but it was the qualitative research that enabled us to understand why it was happening. It's not my intention to delve into the results of the study. Rather, I wish to summarize some of the conclusions that have implications for combating poverty in the Gulf of Nicoya. The results highlight clear areas of opportunity for achieving sustainability in the aquaculture system. They emphasize aspects such as financial stability, circular economy, the modernization of production, and collaboration within the sector. Although our study focused on assessing sustainability and the unit of analysis was the firms rather than individuals, our findings reveal poverty indicators suggesting that many of the farms may be experiencing multidimensional deprivation. However, one finding completely changed the way that we interpret the system. Whilst the socio-ecological system comprises a broad and complex ecosystem of actors, community members are entirely absent and have no involvement whatsoever production. This finding led us to a question assumption that often we take for granted. A projective activity does not necessarily generate local development simply by the virtue of existence. This implies that aquaculture, rather than being a factor that promotes local development and contributes to poverty reduction, currently plays an almost negligible role in the case of Gulf of Nicoya. Our challenge was clear, yet highly demanding. How we could transform all this evidence into a useful information to formulate a management approach that would reverse the situation and turn the aquaculture in the Gulf of Nicoya into a driver of local development. This is how we developed the Golfo Vivo proposal. It is an integrated management approach that purposes the creation of co-governance network involving producers and community within the support of the entire ecosystem of stakeholders. It sets out specific strategies for capacity building, empowerment, coordination, and development of a new economic alternatives for producers and community members. The proposal is current in the validation phase, after which a process of co-management coordinated with the wider network of stakeholders will begin with view to its implementation. Rather than simply a proposal to strengthen aquaculture, aquaculture, Golfo Vivo ultimately became a proposal to strengthen the region's development opportunities, using aquaculture as a starting point. Our expectation is that through Golfo Vivo, we will be able to influence multidimensional poverty indicators by development social capital through coordination of networks, thereby increasing the collaborative capacity and the sectoral cooperation in response to the social, environmental, and economic challenges that arise. The creation of new economic alternatives would provide the community with new source of employment and better conditions for capital recovery. This would facilitate the acquisition of assets aimed at modernization firms, thereby improving their access and connectivity. It would also provide inclusive employment opportunities, enable disadvantaged groups such as women to join to the workforce. Through training, we aim to improve the educational standard of population. Consequently, rather than focusing solely on a poverty alleviation, in line with MPC approach, Golfo Vivo concentrates in scope and achievements of development as a tool combating poverty in the Gulf of Nicoya. Naturally, this approach requires a setting of specific targets to achieve the desired outcomes. Based on these targets, a monitoring plan is established, enable us to adopt an adaptive management approach that adjusts the course of the action toward the achieving results. The screen displays all the proposed achievement indicators that we will be monitoring during the process. As you can see, there are many indicators, and drawing conclusions about success based on a single one will be misleading. This is why creating an index allows us to integrate the results and facilitate conclusion for better decision-making. In light of above, the logic behind multidimensional poverty index is particularly useful for integrating these indicators during the implementation phase. Over the past week, we have discussed at length how to construct multidimensional poverty index. Our experience led us to consider the next step. How do we use the index once implementation begins? In our case, the index ceased to be merely a measurement tool and becomes a means of monitoring the process of territorial transformation. There is a short list of potential KPI indicators that we'll be monitoring, which would eventually enable us to calculate the index. Of course, it is necessary to define the cutoffs of these indicators. However, as we have seen through the course, this is a task to be defined jointly with the ecosystem of stakeholders. Clearly, this has been a long process, and the most challenging part is still ahead, transforming a production system into a driver of local development, capable of combating multidimensional poverty within the social-ecological system. Finally, I would like to express my gratitude for this opportunity to present this project to you. Perhaps the main lesson of this project teaches us is that the greatest challenge lies not in calculating an index, but in creating conditions of those indicators to actually be to change. I hope that some of this experience may prove useful when you return to your own regions to face the same challenge in very different contexts, but with a common goal, to expand opportunities and improve people's well-being. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ana, for illustrating how productive systems, governance, and environmental sustainability interact within a complex sociocultural territory. Now, our second presentation shifts the discussion from a regional scale to a national perspective, focusing on the role of employment and economic transformation in promoting sustainable development. Please, let me welcome our next speaker, Mr. Johnny Rojas Gonzalez. Mr. Rojas holds a degree in International Affairs and works as a coordinator in the Faculty of Businesses at Universidad Latina. Today, he will present a research examining the state of green jobs in Costa Rica and the role of green economy in creating employment opportunities and strengthening dimensions associated with the multidimensional well-being. Once again, Mr. Rojas.
Good evening, everyone. As Don Oscar mentioned, my name is Johnny Rojas from the Business and Hospitality School here at Universidad Latina de Costa Rica. Today, I want to share the findings of our school's research on green employment in Costa Rica, and just as importantly, to connect those findings with the theme that brings us together this week, the measurement and analysis of multidimensional poverty. Because these two agendas, the green transition and the fight against poverty, are not separate conversations. They meet exactly where our study stands, in employment. Let me start with the concept of green jobs. Green jobs are positions that preserve and restore the environment. They improve how efficiently resources are used. They cut emissions across the production cycle and reshape the way goods are made and consumed toward more sustainable models. But here's the point I want you to keep in mind. Green jobs are not only an environmental category, they're also a development category. The International Labor Organization, ILO, estimates that the green transition could create around 24 million jobs worldwide by 2030. Against roughly 6 million jobs lost in carbon-intensive industries, so a net gain of about 18 million jobs. And the ILO frames this explicitly as a pathway for millions of people to overcome poverty. Our conceptual anchor for the research was the ILO's 2019 definition that says that green jobs contribute to preserving and restoring the environment through the efficient resource use and reduced impact on ecosystems. There's one more global figure worth remembering. The ILO calculates that about 1.2 billion jobs worldwide in agriculture, fisheries, forestry, and tourism depend directly on a healthy environment. So the environmental degradation is not only an ecological threat, it undermines livelihoods and with them the fight against poverty. So with that global picture in mind, what did we find in Costa Rica? So the research was carried out by a team of researchers and faculty from the Business and Hospitality School. The objective was to map the current state of green employment in our country, focusing specifically on the tourism and hospitality sector, so that we could identify its activities, its opportunities, its gaps, and its training needs. There is precisely where our research speaks to the theme of this event. This study aligns with the fourth dimension of Costa Rica's multidimensional poverty index, employment and social protection, which encompasses decent work, formal employment conditions, and access to pensions. But why does that matter? Because a person can earn an income and still live with severe deprivations, such in housing, health, connectivity, or social protection. That is precisely the logic of multidimensional poverty, looking not only at how much a person earns, but at how they actually live. And Costa Rica's own data proves the point. According to the 2025 National Household Survey, 6% of Costa Rican households, more than 113,000, are poor only by the MPI. Income measurement would miss them alone entirely. Our question in that spirit was, are green jobs in Costa Rica creating not just employment, but quality employment? To answer that, we ran a national survey that was directed at the tourism and hospitality value chain and received 240 responses spanning the whole value chain, from travel agencies, tour operators on lodging, to food and beverage services, transportation, and now to sustainable farms, artisan collectives, chambers, and other local organizations. Two features of this ecosystem stood out. First, it is largely made up of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. 67% of respondents have 50 employees or fewer, and within that group, 37% are microenterprises of 5 people or fewer. These are organizations notable for their capacity to innovate, their closeness to local communities, and their flexibility to adopt sustainable practices. At the same time, a solid 33% are larger firms with more than 51 employees or more, which means consolidated companies are also part of this transition towards a green economy. Second, the responses reach every one of the country's 7 provinces. So, green employment in Costa Rica is not a phenomenon of the capital or the coasts. It takes root across the entire national territory. And we also believe that there are 3 structural conditions that set the stage so that Costa Rica becomes a fertile ground. First, 99% of the country's electricity comes from renewable sources, one of the highest shares in the world. That gives every business here in our country a clean energy base to build on. Second, nearly 50% of the territory is under forest cover, the result of decades of conservation policy. This is the natural capital that sustainable tourism and green employment depend on. And third, global reputation as a sustainable tourism destination, built over decades of the country's biodiversity and conservation record. Now let me walk you through the 3 main findings of the research. The finding number 1 is that the overwhelming majority of the organizations surveyed report that they contribute to the generation of green employment. In this sector, green employment is no longer the exception of a few pioneers. It has become the prevailing standard or the norm. As mentioned earlier, these organizations range from lodging and hospitality businesses to tour and transport operators, and out to rural producers, artisans, and other grassroots organizations. That tells us something very important. In Costa Rica, green employment runs through the entire tourism experience, from the hotel and the restaurant to the transport to the guide and then to the artisan. It reflects both growing international demand for responsible destinations and Costa Rica's long conservation tradition. Our second finding is that these are not declarations, they are practices. The companies reported concrete measures such as efficient water use, waste reduction and management, environmental certifications, local purchasing, and circular economy in tourism services. I want to underline local purchasing just for a brief moment. When a sustainable hotel buys from local producers, the environmental practice becomes a territorial development practice, income flowing into communities near protected areas. That is where green employment starts touching the dimensions of multidimensional poverty on the ground. Our third finding has to do with geography, and with that, the map of green employment, and with what the map of green employment reveals. The responses concentrate first in the greater metropolitan area, of course, the capital, San Jose, Alajuela, and then Heredia, where the country's corporate and institutional capacity is densest, and where sustainability tends to enter through certifications and formal management. But they also extend outward to the consolidated tourism destinations of Guanacaste and the Pacific, and to the ecotourism and rural tourism territories near protected areas, where green employment often takes the form of community-based and nature-based activity. That outward reach is what matters most for the audience. Those rural territories are on average where multidimensional deprivations run deepest. National data place rural MPI at 17.4% more, the double than the urban 7.0%. So the fact that green employment is establishing itself precisely there is not a minor detail. It means this sector is generating opportunities in the very places our measurement tools flag as most in need. Costa Rica's own results this year point in the same direction. The largest multidimensional poverty reduction was recorded precisely in the Huetar Norte region, down 4.8 points, from 20.6% to 15.8%. This region is home to ecotourism territories such as Sarapiquí and, of course, the Northern Zone. Precisely territories our study described. And what do we conclude and what do we think comes next? First, green jobs are a strategic opportunity for economic growth, for employment generation, and for meeting Costa Rica's international climate commitments in a world transitioning to low-carbon economies. Second, and this is for us the critical distinction, opportunity is not the same as quality. Costa Rica's MPI fell to 9.9% in 2025, below 10% for the first time. Down also from 25.9% in 2010. But among households that remain MPI poor, the leading deprivation in the work dimension is non-compliance with labor rights, affecting 41.3% of them, around 77,000 households. That is exactly why our study insists we need to strengthen training, environmental certification, and business formalization so that green jobs are also decent jobs. Rigorous measurement of job quality is the precondition for effective intervention. Without it, even well-intentioned policies risk being misdirected. Third, the world already knows Costa Rica as a global reference in environmental policy and climate action. While many countries signed the Paris Agreement, Costa Rica turned it into a national decarbonization plan with a net zero target for 2050, a commitment the United Nations recognized with its highest environmental award, the Champions of the Earth. And that same discipline of turning commitments into measurable action shaped how this country measures poverty. What fewer people know, and what matters most in this room, I believe, is that Costa Rica is also a global reference in poverty measurement. This country adopted a national multidimensional poverty index in 2015, built with OPHI. And by presidential decree, the social sector budget must be planned using the MPI alongside income poverty. OPHI itself studies and highlights this case in its executive education programs for government officials worldwide. And in 2017, Costa Rica became the first country in the world to take the MPI inside the private sector through the business MPI developed with OPHI's technical support, applied in more than 70 companies, reaching over 30,000 people, and later replicated across Latin America. Now, let me close with this thought. The green transition will generate millions of jobs, But the question for Costa Rica and for every country represented in this room is whether those jobs will also reduce poverty in all its dimensions. Our school's answer is to keep doing what academia does best, generating evidence, measuring rigorously, and putting that evidence at the service of better decisions for both the private and public sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rojas. It was an excellent presentation. Our first presentation examined productive systems and territorial sustainability. The second presentation explored economic opportunities and labor markets. Our third presentation takes us to the community level and invites us to reflect on a fundamental question. What do we actually mean when we talk about poverty and well-being? Our third speaker is Ms. Vivian Otárola from the School of Social Work at the Universidad Latina. She holds a degree in social work and currently works at INA, most important dual education institution in Costa Rica. Her work focuses on community engagement, territorial development, and social intervention processes developed alongside indigenous communities. Today, she will share an experience developed on the Bribri indigenous territory of Mamubri, reflecting on the use of the Multidimensional Poverty Index not only as a measurement tool, but as a framework for understanding territorial realities, cultural perspectives, and community capacities. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Vivian Otárola.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share this experience. Today, I would like to present this experience of social work, a project developed in the Bribri indigenous territory of Mamubri in Costa Rica. This experience explores how the MPI can become much more than a statistical indicator. Rather than simply measuring poverty, it can help us understand the social, territorial, and cultural dimensions that shape people's everyday lives. Throughout this presentation, I will explain how combining the MPI with territorial analysis and participatory social work approaches allowed us to better understand communities and realities and identified strengths that are often invisible in conventional poverty assessments. This is a map of Costa Rica, and here we can see where the Bribri indigenous territory is located. It is located in the southeastern area of Costa Rica, near the border with Panama. It is one of the country's largest indigenous territory, and it is inhabited primarily by the Bribri people, who have preserved their language, ancestral knowledge, and traditional governance systems. This territory is characterized by rainforest ecosystems and a strong cultural connection with the land. For the Bribris, territory is not only a physical space, it is also a foundation of their cultural identity, spirituality, and collective well-being. The main economic activities in this territory are based upon small-scale agriculture, particularly the production of organic cacao, bananas, plantains, and root crops, cacao processing, and the production of artisanal chocolate. Community-based tourism is also part of the economic activities of this territory. Small family businesses and local commerce. These activities often combine income generation with environmental conservation and the preservation of indigenous cultural practices. The major inequities identified in this territory are, well, despite its natural and environmental wealth, the territory experiences significant multidimensional inequities, including limited access to quality healthcare services, barriers to secondary and higher education due to geographic isolation, restricted employment opportunities, and limited economic diversification. Through this project, we focused on strengthening community capacities through collaboration with local organizations, with community leaders, with entrepreneurs and producers. Initially, the objective of the project was to support local development and improve economic activities. However, this project evolved and we realized that economic development represented only one part of a much broader reality. Community members consistently highlighted the importance of preserving ancestral knowledge, protecting biodiversity, reinforcing cultural identity, and strengthening collective organization. These elements demonstrated that well-being within indigenous territories cannot be understood solely through economic growth. Instead, well-being is deeply connected to territory, to culture, to identity, and community relationships. There was a question that reshaped all this process in the project with the territory of Amubri. How do we understand poverty in territories where well-being is defined through different cultural, social, and territorial realities? We have to understand the specific of territories. What makes them different one from another? We have to understand that rural communities are very different to urban communities. So, from a social work perspective, intervention is not simply about responding to existing needs. It is about involving and understanding how social realities are produced, experienced, and interpreted by the people and communities themselves. This reflection led us to adopt the MPI not only as a measurement tool, but as a conceptual framework for understanding complex territorial realities. One of the greatest contributions of the MPI is that it moves beyond identifying poverty. It allows us to understand that inequity has to be seen in a broader space. Through the MPI, we can identify overlapping deprivations, unequal access to opportunities, unequal enjoyment of rights, and different experiences of well-being. Rather than producing a simple poverty classification, the MPI reveals patterns of exclusion that require context-specific responses. This perspective is especially valuable in culturally diverse territories. In Costa Rica, the MPI has become an important public policy instrument. It has revealed inequalities that traditional income measures often fail to capture, particularly within rural, coastal, and indigenous territories. The information generated by the MPI supports evidence-based decision-making. It helps governments prioritize territories, allocate resources, more effectively, target interventions, and monitor policy outcomes. In this way, data becomes meaningful because it informs in concrete public action aimed at reducing inequalities. However, data alone is never sufficient. It's never enough. The MPI tells us where inequalities exist, but it does not explain why they exist or how communities experience them. So, through social work, we contribute with significant analytical value in this territory. Through participatory diagnostics, human rights approaches, intersectionality, community-based analysis, and participatory action research. In this way, social work helps interpret realities behind statistical indicators. Therefore, the MPI should not be considered the end of the analysis. Rather, it is the starting point for a deeper understanding of inequality. Why does this matter? This matters because the same indicator can represent different realities. We understood through this project that territory matters, culture matters, history matters, and communities experiencing similar multidimensional deprivations may require entirely different responses because their social, their cultural, and territorial conditions differ. Consequently, public interventions must move beyond standardized approaches and become sensitive to local realities. Our experience in the Bribri territory clearly illustrates this idea. The MPI identified challenges related to economic opportunities, access to resources, and territorial inequalities. However, territorial analysis reveals something much deeper. Community productive initiatives were not simply economic activities. They also functioned as a mechanism for preserving ancestral knowledge, their history, strengthening community organizations, and reinforcing indigenous understanding of well-being. These initiatives contributed simultaneously to cultural revitalization, environmental stewardship, collective identity, and territorial development. Thank you very much for your time.
As we conclude these sessions, I would like to thank our presenters for sharing their research and experiences with a round of applause. And now, I would like to ask Mr. Rojas and Mrs. Robles to please join us in the main stage to open the floor for questions. Ricardo will hold the microphone in case that you have any questions. You just raise your hands in case that you have any.
Thank you very much for the presentations. I would like to understand a little bit more in the topic related with green employment. And the question is, how do you determine if a specific employment position is green or not? Do you have metrics or other criteria to determine when employment position is green or not? Thank you.
Hello, okay. Thank you for your question. Well, of course, there are certain criteria that has to be well completed or understood by the companies. So we acknowledge and they acknowledge that they are contributing to green jobs. So, for example, as I mentioned, if they have a waste management service or program in their company as well, Also, for example, if they're using international certifications for their buildings, if they're using energy efficiency programs or systems, so they provide all those services to other companies, they hire those services, and even we explain, for example, to some companies what green jobs are. They did not know beforehand they were contributing to green jobs. So I'd say that's the main reason for companies to understand that green jobs may not be like usual things they do, but they are contributing to green jobs in their daily routines or actions. Yeah.
Thank you. One question there.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really insightful. So I have a question out of curiosity for the last presenter. So you use the MPI as a tool for a T0 assessment of the situation to kind of check the inequalities and kind of also map the cultural identities of the region, etc. Did you do a second time? Did you do like one assessment of the same indicators? And if so, did it change after your intervention?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Did you, so you said you did a first time before the intervention and you measured the MPI. Is that correct?
No, we
Oh,
didn't
my
measure
bad.
MPI at first.
Okay, sorry. So I misread, my bad.
Don't worry.
But I think it would also be interesting if before, like, because I'm thinking about my own research, doing an after and before implementation of, to see like how the indicator can change.
To have a baseline.
Yeah, to have a
Yes.
baseline, exactly.
Exactly. No, the project didn't start as, well, with the MPI framework, but through the process, we understood that the MPI was a tool, very, very important tool to understand different ways of the dimensions and how inequities are presented in the territory. So it was not initially used, but it was later incorporated in the project.
Okay, and do you think you could maybe do it like in different times? Like in 2 years, come back, 3 years, come back?
Well, the project is still alive.
Okay.
So there are many things that are being done. The project does not work only with one investigator. It works with the students.
Okay.
The student practices are held in the territory.
Okay.
And also their final investigations are held also in the territory. So there is a bigger team working with the people and with the community. Initially, when this community approached to the university, we didn't know initially what was going to be done with the community. So the School of Social Work started the diagnosis with the community, participatory research with the community, understanding the value of nature and how it is incorporated in the people's livelihood, in everyday life. So initially, we didn't know what was going to be done with the community. The project talk itself, the community talk itself, and we've been working with them and constructing along the way.
Okay, super. Thank you so much.
We have one more there in the center.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentations. I have a question for the first presenter. In terms of the projects, I want to know about sustainability and especially funding. Like you outlined the different KPIs that would need to sort of be measured against the baseline to see what is happening in the region that you mentioned. But in terms of funding and sustainability, how will you ensure that that will take place?
Can you repeat the question?
So I'm interested in learning about the sustainability of the initiative in the region that you spoke about.
Okay. Well, the proposal of Golfo Vivo is kind of different proposal. The idea is to integrate all the activities, all the efforts that have been made in the Gulf of Nicoya, because there are many stakeholders working, but unfortunately, producers and community don't know what is happening with all the efforts that are made, and all this effort is kind of diluted between all the producers. So the idea is to integrate all the efforts in terms of produce something with a common goal. So the KPIs were defined according to the goals that we previously defined. So we want to have a network, we want to community participate, we want all the stakeholders be part of the network, we want to develop capacities and empower people. So all this achievement that we want to achieve during the process, we use as a KPI and define which indicators is our goals in that moment. So a difference, this proposal is not defined as dimensions like every proposal or every plans that you have seen. This was prepared like one common goal and one road of actions together, completely integrated with specific objectives, but specific results. And the objectives were defined according to the results we desired. And these KPIs is just the reflection of that. And the idea is, okay, well, this is the KPI that we define. Probably there is a way to understand this KPI if we integrate also in an index.
Hello, thank you for the great presentation. I would like to ask for the first presentation, please. Yeah. I'm just wondering about the method approach for your indicator, because I think you are using quite a macro level data from the presentation. Are you going to use the composite index or using counting approach with AF method?
Yes, well, before the proposal, before this step that we are right now, we have a study of the current state of the activity and the ecosystem of the producer ecosystem. As I say you before, we use multidimensional index indicators actually with quantitative information, and actually producers don't have records of the production, and some of the people that works in this field actually don't have records about that. So this study was totally exploratory. The reason why qualitative information like focus groups, interviews, field diaries and things like that give us more information to understand what was happening, what was the perception of the people, of the stakeholders, of the producers and the communities about everything. The idea is to reconfigure the indicators in order to the information is actually we have, and to use the qualitative information to fill the gaps.
Okay, because we don't have any, oh, okay, we have one more.
Sorry, I have a question for the second presenter. Thank you for the really interesting presentation on green jobs. I think that's a really interesting take on employment and MPI. My question was regarding the nature of jobs created, because I think in Costa Rica, about 33% of the households that are poor are informally employed or like self-employed in different professions. And the green jobs, if they're created, would be created in more formal industries, in more formal sectors, right? And this is just like an open question to you to see like, how do you see that transition happening? Whether these companies who would be creating the jobs, would they be reaching out to people who are already in the formal sector? Or do you see like in, the local context, these companies making an effort to reach out to people who are more in the informal sector and try to integrate them into their sphere?
Okay. Well, I believe that the larger firms are working towards a better and greater green jobs opportunities creation. Of course, as I mentioned, Costa Rica has a historical record of leadership in climate change, sustainability. So its laws and public policy give benefits and incentives to these companies to create green jobs. But our research was specifically in the tourism and hospitality sector. So for example, that sector creates or provides to the GDP around 8.2% of the GDP. And of the greater percentage of those companies that contribute to the GDP, around 90 to 95% are micro, small, medium-sized enterprises that are not generally formal or formalized. So I believe the path towards green jobs in a formal or the public and private sector in a formal way are just these public policies and laws that are going to contribute and strengthen the conditions for green jobs to be created. But at the same time, there has to be improvement and, better conditions, easier pathways for those small companies that contribute to green jobs to be able to, formalize and be established as official companies in the country. Yep.
And with that, we close this question section, and I want another round of applause for our presenters. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Today's sessions have demonstrated that multidimensional poverty is not simply a question of income. It's a reflection on how opportunities, territories, institutions, ecosystems, and communities interact to shape people's lives. The three presentations have shown us that sustainable development and multidimensional well-being are deeply interconnected, and that understanding this relationship requires perspective from multiple disciplines and scales. Thank you, OPHI, for creating this space for dialogue and knowledge. And all of you, thank you very much for attending. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.